proceeding to Form 1 to 100% by 2028. But in order to meet the requirement by the president that the graduates should be able to be socially, economically useful, and in going along with the policy requirement of introducing flexible pathways, 2 pathways have been introduced starting from lower secondary education. The one on my left-hand side, called the general education pathway, is not very different from the current one we have. There are some important differences, and we'll talk about them later. The second pathway on my right-hand side, so-called vocational education, this is a new invention. And students will be able to opt for any one of those streams depending on their own personal wishes, their career aspirations, their abilities, and so forth. Nobody will dictate who goes where. In the vocational education stream, which I'm going to talk about for a bit more, okay, students will take 4 compulsory subjects, academic subjects, and those 4 compulsory academic subjects are mathematics, English, a new course called Historia ya Tanzania na Maadili. This actually replaces the old civics. It teaches you, it's aimed at creating Tanzanian values, to impart with you Tanzanian history, the culture, and so forth. And lastly, the 4th academic subject will be business education. Why business education? Business education because the aim is to give each young person the skills needed to transform whatever skills he learns into a commodity, could be a his education. It's an entrepreneurship education, teach you how to start a small business, small medium enterprise, the local taxation systems, the policy regimes, but basic accounting, basic storekeeping, and things like that. In addition to those 4 academic subjects, a student will take 1 vocation, 1 trade from the current curriculum now offered by VETA. VETA is our Vocational Education and Training Authority. It could be plumbing, it could be refrigeration, it could be agriculture, it could be tourism, it could be hairdressing, it could be sports, it could be music, any trade. And you combine that during your secondary school career with 4 academic subjects. At the end of those 4 years, you're examined for the 4 academic subjects by our local National Examination Council. You get a certificate. And for the trade that you took, you are examined by the National Council for Technical Education, and you emerge with the National Vocational Award, Grade 3, which allows you to be employable, if you want, fulfilling the first condition that Her Excellence put to the Minister of Education. But if you don't want to go to work, if you don't want to exit, you can then go on to 3 more years of advanced technical education. These are the type of institutions like the Dar es Salaam Institute of Technology, the Institute of Finance Management, the diploma part, it could be in agriculture, it could be in that. And after 3 years, you get a diploma and you can exit and work as a technician, a paraprofessional. But you can still say, I'm not satisfied with this level of education, I want to go to higher education. You can go to higher education, to university education, but you remain in that technical, or if you want, in that technical stream. So go to technical higher education for your degree and so forth. Meaning that taking that right exit, the right-hand side step, when you're about 12, does not necessarily mean that you'll not go to higher education. But also, if by the time you finish your 3 years of a diploma, you're tired of the technical stream, you can use that qualification to join the general higher education and go to normal universities. That is a summary of the right-hand path. Let's go back to the general education stream. The general education stream still largely aims at or stresses the academic subjects, again for 4 years. But there is one important difference. In the current structure that we have, I think we have 4 streams. You can do science, you can do what they call the arts, you could do agriculture, and you could do business. Those now have been increased to 11, the substreams. And virtually each one of those substreams include a subject which imparts to you some vocational skills such that if you don't proceed over to Form 5 and Form 6, you can still join the world of work. You are employable, or you can self-employ yourself. Can we go to the next slide, please? I've talked about those. Next. Next. Okay, so these 11 streams are science, ICT, agriculture, music, sports, business, social sciences, textile and garment construction, food and human nutrition, art, and languages. One might say, languages? How are you going to work? How are you going to sustain yourself if you just study languages? What we have done in the curriculum is introduce skills in the languages that allow you to learn editing, translating, and kukalimani, interpreting. You can interpret, you can edit, you can translate. And those are marketable skills out in the market. Food and human nutrition will teach you cookery and things like that. Art will teach you theater, will teach you all sorts of useful skills. Sports, of course, everybody knows. Music, everybody knows, and so forth. Can we go back now to, or can we just go, maybe just go to the next slide. Now, if you finish your Form 4 and you don't exit and use one of your vocational subjects for economic activities, you can go to the next level of education, which is general education, upper level. That prepares you for going to university. But even here, we know that not everybody who goes to Form 5 and Form 6 will go to university. Okay? So to take care of that, we have done the same trick that we have applied to lower secondary education. We have introduced some subjects and include them in the combinations. By doing that, we have increased the number of combinations from 18 currently to 60. Among those 60 combinations, 41 of those, more than 2/3, combine at least one subject that, just like in the lower education, impart vocational skills. Can we go next? This is basically a diagram of those streams. At O level, we don't need them. Okay, next. So that is the structure, interpreting the new policy into the structure. That doesn't answer Mwalimu Mabala's question. So the vision and objectives of our education system, we say, should remain aligned with the philosophy of education for self-reliance and should aim at strengthening competencies in the key 21st century skills of communication, collaboration, the main soft skills that every employer says Tanzanians are lacking: creativity, critical thinking, problem solving, digital savvy, ethics, and patriotism. So we have designed the curricula to emphasize the cultivation of these core competencies and practical skills from the lowest grades of education. Next. And 9 minutes, okay. I'll survive that. And to ensure competitiveness, the curricula has been benchmarked with international best practices while remaining cognizant of the national context. We have particularly paid special emphasis on strengthening the teaching of languages to cultivate the communication skill, mathematics, critical thinking, the sciences and technology, as well as embedding the use of ICT in the teaching and learning process of all subjects from the earliest grades, which is the digital inclusiveness that is the theme of this conference. Next. Next. You're eating my minutes. Okay. So that's the curriculum. The structure, then the curriculum. But how is it delivered? To deliver this curriculum, we also need to re-engineer the teachers. And you have done that by first raising the minimum educational qualifications for entry into teacher education for pre-primary and primary school teachers. We have raised this from currently people who go into teaching, primary school teaching, complete Form 4. Now they're going to be completing Form 6, upper secondary education, and the trainees will undergo a 2-year diploma program which emphasizes teaching methodology and practical training. This is very important. I probably partly answers, I hope, Mabala's concerns. You see, to be able to teach a competence-based curriculum, to be able to cultivate these important 21st century skills, the teacher has to be trained in how to do that. And so far, we have been teaching a lot of theory, educational theories to our teachers with minimal practical skills in how to deliver in class. So the new diploma program emphasizes teaching methodology, practical training, adopting the practice used actually in medical schools, where instead of going into a one-off block teaching practice, you actually start teaching in the schools surrounding the teacher training colleges. First in class, simulated teaching, and then outside while you are under observation. Next, please. But we also say that secondary school teachers will be holders of a university degree or equivalent with appropriate training in pedagogy. And as a policy move, all prospective teachers, when you finish a teacher training college or you do an education degree at a university, you have to serve a compulsory 1-year internship program upon graduation where your professionalism is further strengthened. Next. Nothing. We have introduced this vocational stream, but the first question that comes is, where do you get the teachers? The idea is to get the teachers from amongst university graduates with the necessary training, either in engineering, agriculture, tourism, arts, sports, or whatever. And these will have then to undertake a postgraduate diploma in education to equip them with the requisite pedagogical skills. But later on, we shall encourage higher education institutions to introduce degree programs which combine a vocational skill with education. Just like you have a Bachelor of Science with education, you could have maybe a Bachelor of Engineering with education and so forth. Next. We shall also need, because the emphasis is on practical training, the vocational stream, we shall also need workshop instructors who will support practical training of the students. And these will be recruited from amongst skilled artisans who will be given a short training in handling students in pedagogy. Next. And that's the end. We think this is not a cheap thing. It will require quite a bit of investment, but our belief that, and the government I think believes that, at the end of the day, the investments will pay off. Asanteni sana kwa kunisikiliza. Do I sit here?
Asante sana, Professor. We've got 2 questions. Okay, we've got 2 from the audience. I've got 3 already, but in the interest of time, I'll summarize the 2 that I have and give a chance to my camera.
I have 2, and there's the lady with the raised hand here.
Okay.
So in total 5, 6 questions.
Brilliant.
7 questions.
7.
Including your 2.
Perfect.
Let's keep them brief.
Okay. Now, on what we have here, the first question. So thank you for that presentation, and I'm so happy to hear that we are working towards promotion of critical thinking, creativity, ethics, and patriotism, but also communication and collaboration. These have been key soft skills that have been missing in our curricula to date, and hence the employability of our people being also a challenge. But in this question that comes out next, we're looking at how would you assess the current inclusivity of digital tools and technology in education, particularly regarding education training policy to 2014, edition 2023, and the new curricula. So this question is on tools and the technologies for the new curricula. I'm not sure, should I ask the question you answer, or will I ask all the questions and then you have one go to answer?
So let's ask all the questions and then give him the room to respond to them.
Brilliant.
Yeah?
Okay, so I have other two here, then I'll give you next. The curriculum for teachers' colleges has undergone a review as well, and can you comment on which strategy has the government employed to prepare education to effectively integrate digital tools? So this is education and capacitating and upskilling of teachers, and how's government prepared for this? And the last one for me is, what role does ongoing professional development play in ensuring education remains adept at leveraging digital tools to foster inclusivity in education? Over to you. The last question, yes. What role does ongoing professional development play in ensuring education remains adept at leveraging digital tools to foster inclusivity in education? Over to you.
Thank you. So there's a question on, it's written in Kiswahili, but basically the question wants to know the aspects of inclusivity, people with special needs. Your presentation has not mentioned how they've been included and if you've involved them in coming up with the curriculum. Okay. Then my question is, I've looked onto your presentation, sir, with all due respect. I'm totally grateful to have seen that. My question is, I've seen a number of subjects from 48 to 60, but I'm not sure if these subjects are addressing the core issues that probably a country like Tanzania has. For instance, there are aspects of minerals in Tanzania, there are aspects of tourism in Tanzania, and these are already present in Tanzania, and they can address the job industry straight from, lower levels all the way up to advanced levels. So my question to you rather is, how are we preparing the generation, the current generation, to actually be able to take the jobs that are already existing in Tanzania, but all the time we want to explore, for instance, minerals, we have to bring experts from abroad. We want to do this, we have to bring experts from abroad. So my question is, where, at what level, do we then include this subject so that we are able to actually create jobs that are already providing opportunities in the country? Karibu.
Thank you so much, Professor, for that wonderful presentation. My name is Dr. Miriam Siwela. I'm the CEO for Teach for Zimbabwe. I'm also a partner with Kuyenda, GPE EOL program. I'm so glad that in your presentation you included the fact that without ICT, without ICT knowledge, digital, the effective implementation will be quite a challenge. My question to you, as well as the audience, is that how are we going to possibly implement, because one of the challenges we have in Africa is implementation. Our policies, our plans, they are fantastic, but the implementation becomes a problem. Now we are talking about the fourth industrial revolution, but the biggest gatekeepers, the biggest people who have phobia, the people who have fear for this technology, that's why Mr. Richard Olonga's talked about 89% of us not having access. Those who are actually stopping this very important revolution from coming to us are people like me and you, born before computers, We are the decision makers. We are the leaders. We are the school heads. But majority of us, we hate computers. And we are so afraid of these computers. So my question is there a curriculum for us who are born before computers? Us as decision makers, to make sure that we gather together and say yes to infrastructure, yes to the curriculum, yes, bring in those gadgets, because without us embracing this, we are totally wasting our time. Thank you.
Thank you, Professor, for such a wonderful presentation. My question is, I'm Daniel from Opportunity Education Foundation, Tanzania, and my question is there any plan of moving away from content-based learning assessment to portfolio assessment, if at all we are focusing on testing and testing and implementing skill-based learning? That's my question to you.
Okay, one last question. One last question, and then we can respond, and then you can wrap up.
Thank you so much, Professor. My name is James Chimbia from Malawi, a youth representative under FAWEMA. It seems most of my questions have actually been asked already, but then I'll just extend on what Dr. Miriam was pointing out about the practicality. In Africa, we know that we have like these content that we teach to the students, but most of it is taught in theory. And we can talk about life skills, we can talk about science and technology and the like. But you find that in schools, most of this content is all theoretical. Students don't actually go and do practice what they learn in class. So my question is, how much of this are we preparing to put into practice so that the learners don't just learn theory, but also practical, which, as you mentioned, will prepare them for the job market if they are not able to proceed to university or colleges. Thank you.
CK, over to you. That side, I have no idea what is going on, but yeah, we pray for you.
And I think Professor will respond to some of the questions now. Yes?
Thank you. Well, I suppose these are really questions. Some of these are things we should be discussing rather than one person addressing them. But I'll start with what I think are probably the easiest. Chibia, your last one. How much teaching would be theoretical and how much is practical based? We have designed the curricula. Remember, okay, it's a round two of a competence-based curricula, but we've designed the curricula with practical skills as its main core. Even things that I said, business education, for example, is compulsory. Even business education is taught through what are called labs. And these labs are practical things that you do. And in a way, what your question is very similar to the other colleague who was talking about assessment. When are we going to move away from content-based assessment to portfolio-based assessment? All these have been designed in. For example, in some of the more creative subjects, maybe art or garment construction, a student develops a portfolio of material, maybe from the second year or third year of his or her secondary education, accumulates these, and they're going to be assessed at the end. This is something that you do with your hands. In the sciences, for example, even some of the social sciences, for example, projects have been built in. And projects are actually not very new in our curriculum. I remember when I was at secondary school, I had to do a project too. But the projects are now a lot more practical, and they're assessed, actually. They contribute to your final grade when you graduate. And because the curriculum itself has been constructed to make most of the activities practical, even the teaching and learning material, the books that are being produced now by the Tanzania Institute of Education are designed such that the teacher cannot avoid giving practical classes. I remember we were visiting some workshops for producing some of these books. And then I remember looking at a sample manuscript, and the teacher has actually developed a whole chapter describing equipment. Then I asked him, but you have a whole chapter describing equipment. How is that going to work? You're going to give the student a theory of the various equipment. Why don't you introduce the equipment when you first teach the student how to use it? Because then this equipment is alive. It's associated with a task. That's how you embed theory and practice during teaching. Dr. Siwela, your question sort of very similar to one of yours about continuous professional development of teachers. How do you empower the teachers to use IT? As I said, you go to the syllabus, apart from the curriculum, now you go to the syllabus, the activities. You're going to teach the student, maybe in class 3 or class 4, about addition. And one of the things you have to do, one of the tools of doing that is using IT. You have to. So the teacher, we're going to have continuous professional development of the teachers. Those that will be produced after the new curriculum, they'll be fine. They'll be taught how to use it. But we have a lot of teachers already who are in the schools, and some of them who have the education. One of the key roles of the Tanzania Institute of Education is to retool these teachers, to give them continuous professional development. And interestingly, one of the strategies they're using is actually using IT-enabled continuous professional development. And the World Bank, through one of the projects, is actually supporting this, is assessing the skills gap at both the teachers, the Tanzania Institute of Education, and also the skills gap with the teachers, with a view of removing those gaps so that they can actually cope very well with the new curriculum. Relevance of subjects. This came from you, our MC. Tanzania, for example, we are famous for gemstones. Okay, one of the central plank of the new policy, again, for example, these vocational streams. There are more than 60 of those streams. We say, okay, I think the schools should concentrate, not exclusively, but they should put more emphasis on those vocations that are more relevant in particular areas. So if your school is in a fishing community, we shall encourage the students to take fishing, aquaculture as a vocation. If you're in a mining area, we shall encourage you to take a vocation that relates to mining. So we're not just introducing the subjects. That's why I made that comment that you see one of the streams is languages, and in the languages you have English, you have French, you have Arabic, you have Chinese. I said, but how is that going to help? You see, you have to put in those skills that they can exploit in their local context for economic gain, while at the same time not forgetting that they need not stay in their own communities. They also have to remain globally competitive. Something I did not want to say, but global demographic dynamics are such that in the next 30 years or so, most of the young labor force in the world will be African. You already see, I think Kenya is signing contracts with Germany and Japan already to provide some middle-level technical people. Germany is advertising. There are some countries, I think the Netherlands is interested in securing agricultural technicians from our countries. That will only work if we give them a decent vocational education that is locally relevant but also globally competitive. Oh, tools. That's the difficult one. Integrating digital tools in teaching and teacher training, I think that I've probably answered that the curriculum is doing that, and for those who did not follow this curriculum, there's continuous professional development in that area. I think the main issue remain the tooling. For this curriculum to work, these digital instruments should be in the schools. And of course, the government has already embarked on this path. Last year, all the teachers were given tablets. The Tanzania Institute of Education has developed some platforms that can also be used offline. So there is commitment on the part of government to invest sufficiently both in the provision of tools to the learners. Already it has provided some of the tools to the teachers, and with the increasing pace of improving connectivity in the country, it is actually a viable project. We see this as a very important step. It is not going to be cheap, but at the end of the day, the benefits accruing from this will probably far outweigh the investments that government will have put in it. I think that probably will suffice for this first round of questions. Oh, great.
Okay. Thank you very much, Professor, for that session. And to conclude the session we're looking at with the new curricula is going to be more practical learning, as well as relevance of subjects for skill emphasis, particularly ensuring skills for the local content and context, so that children are taught what is needed per the area also, so that's also being paid to mind. But also particularly also looking at empowering young people with skills they can exploit. So this is really good as well. And then also within their communities, empowering them with tools, which the government is working on. It's a work in progress. But all in all, again, I repeat that what we're looking to do is teach in a different way that allows promotion of critical thinking, creativity, ethics, patriotism, but also communication. And I like to agree with all that's been said, because as Lyra as well, we work particularly on the same reasons and on the same promotions through our technology inclusive education, where we work to upskill teachers. As we do understand, with the new curricula, teachers will need to be upskilled to promote the use of ICT. If they can't use the computers themselves, they will not be looking to teaching with them. So we're working very closely with that, but also through setting up of centers of excellence to promote peer learning as well. So to conclude our session, I'd like to thank everybody for this time, and particularly thank you, Professor, for that enlightening session. Asante sana.
Just before you take the final picture with Professor, I'm not sure if Professor responded to the question people with special needs. Yes, please. They are here and they are keen to know what you have to say about it.
It was, okay, both the policy and the curricula have taken into account people with special needs. First, all the new teacher trainees will be taught how to handle at least the minimum special needs, inclusivity. But there'll be also special programs for special needs education. And these have been completely redesigned with assistance of experts in the area. The main thing, one of the central planks of this policy and the curricula is inclusivity. And you do that if it's mild impairment, if it's not serious, you do it in class. So for example, every teacher will be taught the sign language. Braille we cannot teach for everybody, it's too specialized, but everybody learns sign language. You're taught in screening, so first screening can be done in a general class, and then if, depending on the level of impairment, you go into the special classes, and there we have designed special programs for the different types, for the main types of impairment.
Thank you very much. Another round of applause to Professor NCK. Can I request you to please stand at the front for a picture? So, very well moderated, CK. Thank you very much. A round of applause. Let's put our hands together for them. Very informative session. Professor, I must say you reminded me of, as you take your seat, you reminded me of a story I came across last week whereby a frog was observing a snake riding a horse. Then a frog told a snake, "Can I teach you? Can I show you how to really ride a horse so that you can enjoy?" And then the snake allowed the frog to really show him. So after the frog came back, the snake appreciated the lesson, and then he told the frog, "To know how to ride a horse is one thing, but to own one is another thing." Why am I saying this, Professor? Back to my original question is because, yes, we want to really raise globally exposed skills. But again, you know the questions where we ask about the practicability. If you teach someone something that can only be found in China, but they can't go to China to practice that or to have that practical skill, I think it's probably high time. And I've taken this from one person, I think from Zimbabwe, who said the future is there for those who prepare for it. We have people coming from the US into our minerals, and we do not have Tanzanians. I come from Shinyanga, a mineral-rich region. I do not even have a single mine, not a single clue of where to even acquire knowledge on mining in my own country. So I think probably the words "charity begins at home" should really be reflected in our curriculum. Having said that, I now have the pleasure to bring to the stage Dr. Emmanuel Manasseh. Dr. Manasseh, are you with us? Karibu sana as he comes to the stage. Dr. Manasseh is the lecturer at Nelson Mandela African Institute of Science and Technology. He's coming to moderate the next session. He's going to introduce his speaker, and then Doctor, you have 40 minutes. Karibu sana.
Thank you very much. Our next session is the role of Education Development Partners Group in strengthening basic education system in Tanzania. And I'll be with Dr. John Lusingo. He is an educational policy and system expert. He's a Tanzanian, currently working with the British Commission as an education advisor. Dr. John Lusingo is a graduate of Warwick University with a PhD in education, served as a technical leader and also a specialist for education management at subnational government on education quality improvement program in Tanzania. He worked also with UK aid funded bilateral programs between 2013 to 2020. Later moving into his current position of education advisor at FDID from 2016. Dr. Lusingo is currently chair of governing board for the Institution of Community Development in Tengeru, Arusha. He has immense experience in PPR financing, having overseen education financial bilateral programs in Tanzania and FDD. Okay. Dr. Lusingo was a member of the Global Partnership of Education Task Force, culminated 84 million USD for a task force that culminated this for Global Partnership for Education Task Force, and he could attract 84 million USD for the compact financing. Please, a round of applause as we will do a presentation and then we'll proceed with the discussion. Welcome.
This one? I've been told to keep the mic, but I think I'm louder than the mic. What about that? Good afternoon. Good afternoon. I think this should look more like a rethinking conference than it is currently, because I think are people so exhausted? Because if they're exhausted, then we'll just go into a question and answer session. Yeah? It's very exhausted. No? Good afternoon. That's better. So yeah, but I think I'm normally very nervous when it comes to this introduction, because it's very hard to step in. Professor Maboko's CV is almost, you don't even get even 30% of what he has done, but it's admiration and acknowledgement of what he has done for this nation, and particularly his recent task. I think, Professor, as I've said it several times, you've done us proud, because it's a comprehensive job that you've done, and I think a lot of Tanzanians that we've met around the country have appreciated what you've done. I've been given a task which was supposed to be done by one of my colleagues, but let's keep her in our prayers for those of you who have that faith. The partner is sick in bed this morning, having undergone an operation, and let us wish him well. So I'm going to step in. If there was a time that you could really convince me to step in somebody's presentation, this is the time. And that is an expression of goodwill. As I've been introduced, my name is John Lusingo. I work with the British High Commission as an education advisor. Forget all the other things that have been said about me, because those don't describe me. What describes me is the job I do currently that I'm being paid for, which is an education advisor. I do not know whether that it is there. That's the presentation. I'm not going to follow it verbatim. I'm just going to do what I think was what she had intended to present to you, and that should do, because anyway, I also work in this sector, so I know exactly what she had intended to say, although the presentation was hers. So let me just access mine. You know, when you talk of being technically challenged, I mean, IT challenges, I think I'm one of them. I think I fall in the group of the BBCs. I need my glass. Yeah, so password. It's my password that I have. How much of my time is being eaten up by trying to access this? Okay, I'm there.
So you've in total consumed 15 minutes. You are left with 25.
That saves my life, because then I don't have to say a lot. So, development partners, I think I normally want to start by a comment, which is an intellectual comment. Every time people talk about development partners, there is that myth that it is these people who own development, these so-called development partners, of which I am part of, by the way. And that sometimes gets people shut out, particularly when you start a presentation like this. They say, oh, it's the same old story about these development partners, people calling themselves development partners. But there's a reason why they call themselves development partners. But that is a debate for another time. However, the presentation was about the role of education development partners, or as a group, in strengthening basic education in Tanzania. One thing that you need to know about development partners is not an individual, it's about institutions. It's a collection of what other people would prefer to call the donor countries, coming together, forming a group, what we would call the local education group, to be able to support the government of Tanzania in either bilaterally or multilaterally in trying to improve the quality of education. Now, there's so many of them. Think about every capital that you know from Europe plus the States. and you'll know what we're talking about. So it's that correction as a group. What I would say in short, rather than going through this, the flipping through the presentation, is that the main objective is to be able to coordinate what would call the bilateral or the multilateral dialogue or partnership between the government of Tanzania and any of these capitals. However, the only variation, the only difference is that each of these partners has a different sort of approach in how they go about this partnership. Some of them have sector, what we call direct budget sector support. Others go through the EP4 payment by results mechanism. Others just have projects. Others have programs. So each one of them has a different approach. However, when they do come to advocacy, or when they want to pursue their interest as a group, then they form what is called the Development Partners Group. So I won't mention all these capitals, all these countries that are brought together by this sort of interest. However, specifically, it is about how they facilitate the process of education development support in Tanzania through financing, but also sometimes through research, and in other cases through shared experiences of how the programs work. Currently, any program that you see, any education program that is donor funded will fall under that category. I won't go into the statistics of the budget. If Faith was here, she would have given the statistics of the budget. Currently, Faith, who was supposed to be present, comes from the organization that chairs the Donor Partners Group, which is UNESCO. And then the vice chair is UNICEF. Now, all those are just stories and histories. But what's the issue here? How do these organizations, as a group or individually, take part in ensuring that they achieve the objectives that they set out, which is working as a partnership with the government of Tanzania? And what is their role? That is part of the discussion, and perhaps the main part of the discussion. I would say this. Let's demystify some of the things. One, most people will tell you, when I talk to people, say, you work for a British High Commission. Yes. So you people have certain hidden interests in Tanzania. You're not just, there's no free lunch. The money that you give has certain conditionalities tied behind it. And I tell them, great. For example, I normally give them an example of one program that I oversee myself and tell them it's 90 million pounds for 4 years to improve the quality of primary education. So I ask them, what do you think is the interest of UK aid in Tanzania behind that money? Because if you know that, then you're a better place. If you don't know it, then don't make the claim. That's myth number one. Myth number two is that when this money comes, it has conditionalities tied to it. And I tell those people, yes, have you ever drawn up a list of the conditions that you know that are normally tied to this money? That would prevent you actually implementing a full program to the level that you will be successful. Because if you haven't, I would tell you, I would testify, I would tell you that I've been involved in a program, 4 years program, to improve the quality of education. It had certain objectives, learning outcome being one of them, improving the management of education being another, improving community mobilization being the third one, and also ensuring that there is an improvement in monitoring, evaluation, and learning. And I've seen all those components being implemented. And they involve government officials. And it's based on a memorandum of understanding. And it's done in the regions. And it's done in the schools. And it's done in the communities. Then my question is, to what extent do you think this is part of UK aid? And to what extent do you think this is not part of Tanzania's interest. And I suppose that is what people want to know. To what extent can we actually claim to have an impact in supporting the education of Tanzania? So what else do you want me to say? Containment is one of those mechanisms where we support, which are a result as a consequence of donor-funded programs of UK aid. And what are we doing here? We are rethinking how we could make a difference by thinking about the system. So my question is, where does the rethinking start? And where does it end? Where does the rethinking of the country start and where does it end? And where do we start, where do we end? Through these programs, I'll give you, based on my experience in UK aid, anytime there is a portion of the 0.7% from UK, which has been apportioned for education, they do decide how much goes to bilateral programming and how much goes to multilateral programming. And then they ask us, as locals, me being one of them, what is the government interest? And the government interest can be found into the education sector development plan, because that's what lays out the government agenda. And inside that education sector development plan, we decide as a post or as a partner, we decide where can we make our impact. So we may decide to whether go for a primary education subsector, or we might go to early pre-primary or secondary education or higher education. And once we decided, then we have dialogue with the government. That's why we start dialogue with the government. Say, there is this amount of money coming from, where do you want it to be utilized? And then we sit together and we design. I presume, and I know, I'm sure, a lot of programs do the same. So they sit down with the government, they agree on certain parameters, priority areas of the government through the education sector development plan, and then choose, and then they decide to take it on through a number of processes. Now I've said I'm going to use British High Commission as an example because that's what I know a lot about, but I know that in our group, Education Partners Group, we share the same sort of approach. So we write a business plan, say this is where Tanzania's educational sector development plan is, these are the priorities, and we make a narrative. We produce a narrative of why we think that that area deserves to get more investment. And then we talk about the comparative advantage of that area compared to the countries in the neighborhood. And then once we agree and the captors agree, then they say, you go ahead. And the money comes. Normally, when I'm challenging my friends who say that it's about serving foreign interest, I ask them, if we engage in seriously thinking about education systems, then we are better placed to have a better bargain and negotiations, because we decide where the investment goes. So when I ask the question, where does the rethinking stop or where does it start? My question should have been, what has happened with the previous thinking? To what extent has it lost ground? To what extent do we need to improve it? What are the issues that have really have brought about this idea of trying to rethink? Is there something that we need to know? You may be surprised to know that through the researches that we have from TEDMET and other people, that is where we normally develop the idea of rethinking. So it's quite timely. The job done by Professor Maboka and his team didn't start from them. It started from that sort of thinking. Consistent and persistent research claiming the quality of education is declining. It's not declined fully dead, no, it's declining. Statistics, data. From that is where the education partners in the form of education partner group now pick up these as evidence to be able to make a narrative to say This is where we need to channel our support for the next 4 years. I now oversee a program known as Shule Bora. It's a Swahili word for quality school, but it's supposed to mean quality education. Everything else, the designing and the writing of the business case was based on the data and evidence provided from different organizations. John stated here, John Kalage, with all due respect. When he was working for Haki Elimu, a lot of scripts were on our desk, continuously, quoted in every meeting. Look at the number of girls out of school. Look at the number of issues that make schools unsafe. Look at the primary education performance. Look at the level of financing. And this is what sometimes, later culminate into what we call advocacy issues. So we pick up issues with the government, dialogue with them, and then show them the data and the evidence. And then from there, everybody goes back to their own post or their own institution, and then sits down and plans where to support. So that is how. I think that is rethinking. That is trying to rethink. It's a continuous process. So for me, this is very timely. Our role as development partners is to continue and never to relent about rethinking, but challenging also a lot of our colleagues and Tanzanians in this room that rethinking is not a cut and dry process. It has to be an issue based on the changing dynamics. One of them now we've been told is technology, but the other one, which is now more important, which is my ending note, is about the rising rate of population. 2022 census data now is giving us food for a thought to try and rethink about the systems in the fourth industrial revolution. We built more classes, we built more schools, but even now, the kids that who had their examinations released yesterday, I am sure in January, will be told they do not have learning space. Or we will cram them in the schools and then later realize that those classrooms are not friendly enough to be able to support a conducive learning environment. That's why we need to think continuously, every single day, every single minute. What if I end there? And then listen from you. I hope I've not offended anybody. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Please have a seat. We're going to have some questions, or maybe I will start the discussion. The Sustainable Development Goal number 17.
Partnerships.
Partnership for the goal. And this is very important because when you talk of partnership for the goal, it means both parties have their goals. And partnership for the goal, it means you should know your goal. And one of the most important things is rethinking education in the fourth industrial revolution. I remember in the morning session, we heard about skilling, upskilling, and reskilling to be fit for the purpose and fit for the future. How are we prepared as a nation? How are we prepared to make sure that no one is left behind? And when I was presenting and I was going also through the presentation, there's a point of improved collaboration with the government. So I just want to ask, I know that the government, especially in this regime, they're doing a great job in improving collaboration with these development partners. What do you think could be done more to improve partnership between the government and these developing partners?
Thank you very much. We'll take a couple of other hands. Feeling generous, you're left with only 5 minutes, but I'll give you 5 more minutes, so 10 minutes.
Thank you.
Karibu.
Thank you. My name is Rachel Gondo from University, Kuyenda Collective. My question is, as development partners, what kind of leverage do you have to actually hold governments to account, especially when it comes to transparency in terms of evidence that has been used to inform decision making, and also being transparent about what the money has actually done. Thank you.
Madam Faraja is raising the hand as well.
You're raising now? Ooh. Okay, we'll come back to you.
Thank you, John, for the presentation. Oh, okay. You see, I should have danced. I didn't dance earlier. Thank you, John, for the presentation. I think you've really automated the content, that it came flowing straight without going through the presentation. My concern was around your involvement of CSOs, especially local CSOs. I am glad that you cited how Haki Elimu was evidently and actively involved in the process of developing the programs and the projects. I understand there has been significant engagement of CSOs in developing these projects, but I'm very curious to understand, how do you envision involving local CSOs in running the programs and the projects? We all know development is local. We all know the role and the value that so many of the local organizations have played in the education sector. Do you have any deliberate plans to actually involve local CSOs, and I'm emphasizing on the word local, in implementing these programs, and not only to engage them actively in the development of the projects, but then after the aftermath, when it's successful, to also allocate, and I'll be very specific, to also allocate some of the funding, the resources to these local CSOs, so that we can also build their capacities to ensure that they engage in implementing the projects, because they are in the communities, in the grassroots, but to also improve their capacities and systems going forward so that they can continue being active partners. And another question is directed to you, but the intention is, of course, for all development partners to maybe food for thought going forward, but of course, they can respond to it. Thank you.
Thank you, madam. There's a hand over there.
Yes, I'll go to that hand. There's one hand here, and then there's answered our prayers, so there's another hand there.
Okay, thank you so much. My name is Tokozani Pili with Fawe, under the Kuyenda Collective. I just want to know to what extent development partners coordinate with government when they are implementing their different interventions. Also to learn how you leverage on the government structures to make sure that there's also ownership of those interventions on the part of government, and also for sustainability.
And a final hand, and then you can respond, and then wrap up, picture, then we dance.
Thank you for your presentation, Dr. Mr. Lusango. Now, my name is Dr. Wambia. I'm consulting for FIATU. My question is this: at some point, the United Nations had actually said that development partners should dedicate 2.5% of their budget on development program of developing countries. That would substantially help these countries meet their needs. Now, you told us that you have a consortium of donors here. What is the percentage of your budgets to dedicate? Because otherwise people will argue that you are doing too little, which may not fundamentally help people. Thank you.
Please respond to them.
Okay. Let me start by the question about improved collaboration. Listen, if you work with governments, either it doesn't matter which approach, either bilateral or multilateral, there's one thing that you should know, that there is what we call the operational context. The dynamics of the operational context can determine a lot of how you can actually collaborate. In the past regime, the space was quite narrowed and sometimes closed down. There are certain issues that were taboos that you could not talk about. There were political, I don't know what the political time bombs. For example, the issue of re-entry. People could not talk about re-entry, but it was in the it was in the education policy. And there was a specific clause that would allow re-entry, but people could not talk about it. Why? Because the regime at that moment could not entertain anything around the entry with their own narrative. So in those cases, that is where now you come back to the CSOs. That's where internment now becomes important, because that is what they are by virtue of the law and the regulations that regulate civil societies. Those are the people who are allowed to actually raise such issues. I know my friend was once told, if you continue raising data in a public meeting, I will come down on, that was a sitting minister, by the way. I'll come down on you like a ton of bricks. But what did he do? He did not relent. He just changed the tactic of advocacy. Went away from antagonizing and made a case through the media. It was just one advert that changed around everything. You just change around the messaging. Don't talk about that girls must go back to school, but point to the disadvantages of the girls, of a girl child being denied a second opportunity or an opportunity to education, and the economic implications. It was a change of tactics. Now, this time round, the space is opened up. The dynamics have changed. There are a lot of priorities coming in. So what do? That is why we say we as a group then sit and say, which are our advocacy points as a group? Can we choose which ones actually reflect the current situation of the country? They tell us that we are reviewing the curriculum, say, okay, right, our support then will be, first of all, to ensure that we finance Professor Maboko's team to carry out these consultations. After that, we sit down and say, what are the results of this? Can we have consultation? And then what next? Now we are organizing ourselves to ensure that every donor partner picks up a certain item in supporting the curriculum rollout. My organization has focused on trying to support the teachers for English teaching. We don't have them. The results yesterday show that there's a problem. So we're saying, what can we do? We need to see how we use the local teachers to be able to carry on. If we are going to get support, then we'll do that. So we'll recalibrate our funding to move away from things that we think now may take time and channel back to the support of the curriculum. That is what we mean by improving collaboration, but also ensuring that the government, the people that we work with, our equals, our government, within the government guidelines, are supported through certain skill sets on how to deliver the new curriculum. So it's not about just sitting there in the meetings, going for capacity building. No, it's to say, we think this guy can do a good job. However, he needs to be supported here, budgeting, planning, oversight, monitoring and evaluation. So when we say improved collaboration, the collaboration is there, but we need to ensure that we recalibrate it so that it matches the need of the time. Yeah. But also, another way that we do it is through ensuring that we come up with a payment by result mechanism, where we say, government, listen, you can do a lot, you can achieve a lot. We may not have the finances to give you to achieve those objectives that you have to objectives. However, we can agree on the certain priorities that you cannot cover. We will support you. Let us have the disbursements linked indicators, support you to work towards them. If you achieve these results, this is the amount you're going to get. So you get twice the amount that you've invested. When they do achieve, we tell them that is an incentive for you. It's an extra money, pot of money. You can use it in whatever way, in whatever you want to do, but it has to be in the education sector. As a result, they've been able to refurbish all the old public schools, given a facelift, build more hostels, retool and rekit the teacher training colleges, and they realize that actually, by doing that, they also build their capacity, because that becomes a recurrent activity. We tell them now, forget it's not a dispersal indicator. Now it's a recurrent activities. So embed it in government. That comes to the question of about accountability. How do we ensure accountability? Now what we do, we say, okay, this is what you've done, excellent. We are going to have an independent verification team. It's going to go out, talk to you, and you decide on a sample of schools and local governments. And then we decide what parameters are we going to measure. When they bring back the report, we sit as a strategic management team. Government on one side and the other, and then we say, this was your performance. Which one do you agree with and which one do you disagree with? They argue their case, we argue our case. Once we've done that, we collate the results and then put a value to each result, and then they are paid. Once they are paid, before we do that, we go to what we call the technical working groups, and we see which are organized according to thematic areas. And you say, okay, in quality of education or quality on financing, what were the indicators about financing? How did they perform? Why were they not very successful? What should we do? Once we agree, then the government goes back as it meets as a senior management team between the two ministries. When they come back, we sit in what we call the Education Sector Development Council, which is the decision making, a joint decision making, and we say, this is the way we are going to go, this is what we have, and we have the annual sector performance report. Once we agree on that, then our last course of action is to agree on how do we amend the education sector plan so that it addresses the challenges of the current site. And that is how we've been able to say, this is the number of classrooms we need, this is the number of teachers we need. And by the way, it is through that way that we've been able to get what he read in my bio, the compact funding from the Global Partnership of Education. That is going to support the teacher planning, teacher workforce planning and what? And management, is it? Management. It's going to focus on teachers, absolutely. And we need to harmonize that to the support of the new curriculum. So the issue of teachers has its funding, but it's followed the process. And we've been able to hold government to account to say, this one is not good, this one is not working, it's not easy. But that's what it means by sector dialogue. That's why we call it a sector dialogue. That's where partnership becomes challenging, but also becomes fruitful. And then on CSOs, listen, I've always told even my colleagues privately from the CSOs, don't just make a case, but prove that that is the case. If you pick up an item, for example, for advocacy, and say, we are going to be talking about books, give us the evidence that the books are not there, but also show us where we have books. How have they supported learning? So that we have a comparative discussion. And we say now for example, I think we have Wajibika. I think you're part of Wajibika. Wajibika is a civil space that we are trying to, Tuaweza, when Tuaweza was hit, the CSOs were hit. Trying to coming back from that, recovering from that, isn't easy, we know. But we know that the moment it's just how we present our case and how we make that case robust. Data, there's a case, data, compare, where does it happen in Tanzania, but also where do we have successes in Tanzania? So that you give the government both sides of the story. What government doesn't want is to be always told of what is not happening. But if you would give them, say, this is happening here, and this has been the product, this was the input, and these are people who have been doing it, then it's that. Now, how do we allocate? What we've decided is that rather than just finance CSOs isolatedly, as an isolated individual, we would rather involve them. Your executive director was part of the team that I was in the GPE. So if you don't have this is smart, I think I can say, you give him an extra bottle of water. But if he's not smart enough, you don't get the money because nobody makes a case. If you get somebody who is seated there, doesn't make a case, people are going to assume you are okay. But if he's there and he makes a case for the money, says this is what we do and shows what you do, and they normally, because every time I was telling John, now sometimes there's a place that I used to get used to him. He used to sit here. And I know by now he would be giving these covers. I say, you are only here, but you should be also there. Give us more support. Because you have to be seen, and you have to make your case more robust by the evidence that you have. remember that the education sector does not have the rubber stamp for the CSOs. The NGOs are under community development. So I think the other thing is to go back to the community development, because you do more in the localities under community development than, although you're doing other things under education, but who knows? Your data is in the community development, because I'm a stakeholder there. So I know, I get a lot of things. I say, but these are these people from education. They say, but yeah, but they're doing things in our patch. So I think that is something that you can look at for the future. I shouldn't have said that, but yeah. Tokozane, what extent do we dedicate DPs, to what extent do DPs coordinate partnership? I think I've talked about the technical working groups. Here we have what we call the local education group. As DPs, we say, okay, as an education, from our side, we come with advocacy point, and we don't create our own, by the way. We pick up from their own reports. Once we've done that, then we agree. We say, if we take this as a single country, you may never get anywhere. But if we take it as a group, then we allow our chairman say, can we have dialogue with our heads of mission meeting the minister? So they meet the minister and they put our case on the table. And then the minister would send us back to the technical working groups. And then the technical working groups will go into thematic areas. And then from the thematic areas, we come back to the ESDC. And so what we decide, it becomes government policy. That is how we coordinate. Finally, Dr. Wambia, dedicate 2.5 of the budget to development of the country. Let me tell you, if you take that approach, there are people who are going to pull out. When COVID hit and post-COVID, let me give you an example of UK. When the UK Brexited, it went from 0.7% to 0.5%. Everything else was cut. Now, I don't know, but now, I think the PADA is not yet. But now, they might be going back into an election. We are already being told, oh, okay, we could. Now, listen to that. We could be giving you more money. I think that is dangerous if we took that approach. For us, the best thing is to come into a joint financing framework, multi-donor framework, funding framework. And now that we are encouraging to have results-based financing more and more. Because through that, you get more value for money than if I had said, I'm going to allocate 2.5 of my budget to you. If it doesn't happen, do you know what happens in London? The Daily Mail picks up and says these people have just built, we always constantly being reminded of an airport in St. Vincent, which was built where the planes, when they're landing, I don't know whether to, against the wind, and they said close it down. And then we are given an example of a school in Pakistan which was built, and then the walls fell the next day. Now if they put that story in there, do you know what the people are going to say there? Let us not take our money to places that we even don't know. By the way, that is the reason they call it development partners, because if you call it donor countries, it means you are donating. But if you call it development partners, you are doing something noble. It's a noble mission. Do it through the programs. Thank you very much.
Yeah, thank you very much, and I really appreciate Dr. John. To wrap up in just a minute, number one, we need to open up the education sector to the wider sector players by ensuring that our development partner group, together with the local partners and the government, work collaboratively to achieve the goals. I think you heard that local partners know the pressing issues in our country. So these development partners, by collaborating with the local partners and the government, we can achieve the goal that is fit for the purpose and fit for the future in this digital era. Thank you very much.
A round of applause. Thank you very much. But before you take the final picture, moderator, with your permission, and this is me allowing you to allow your keynote speaker to respond to this question. There are questions that are coming through the chat room, and I would really wish to encourage us to send questions in the chat room, because through the questions in the chat room, then we are able to, get more time and explicit to, and we're at least very certain that I will ask those questions. So there's a question that was asked. Bilateral donors have separate country strategies for the host or recipient countries. How does the development partner education group ensure their support aligns with each country's strategy? Okay. Then another question is, but if you do lobbying and advocacy, you must be very careful. I think this is a comment creates any challenge, they categorize you negatively. But the question is, how do the DP education group ensure their support aligns with the country's strategy? Maybe for 30 seconds, if you can respond to that quickly. Alignment between the DP group and the country strategy. You can respond from here.
Yeah, I think we made it a point amongst ourselves as DPs, never to develop a program that deviates from the education sector development plan. And we are very keen that every time that this document is about to run out of its time, we finance the review of this document and ensure that it is simulated to reflect the realities of the time. For example, the 2020, the one that we should be running now, is under review again. Why? Because it has to align to the curriculum, the new curriculum. That's one. But two, it also has to align to the 2022 census data, because it's showing that we're having more kids being born. So if we did develop it in 2022, it's already outdated because the data we used was from the previous census and previous education sector data, the best education statistics. We realized that actually we're having more kids that are in school, but there are also equally kids that are out of school. So we need to ensure that we capture every data to make sure that once we do the simulation for the number of classrooms, number of hostels, number of teachers, most important, critically, they reflect the reality. The answer to the question was, we align to the education sector development plan. That is the roadmap of the national education system in Tanzania.
Thank you so much. Another round of applause. May I request you to please stand up, take 2 steps forward for a group picture, just the two of you. And as they do that, do we have students from the universities here? By the show of hands, if you know you're a student invited from the university. Are there any of us? I'm only seeing 2 hands. There are only 2 hands. Okay, I'll come talk to you. Now, who knows our official hashtag for this conference? Does anyone know the official hashtag for the conference? Anyone? Okay, I will say it because we're going to use it for the next, as the next icebreaker activity. So basically, the initials IQEC 2023. Okay? IQEC 2023. So I'm going to put a song. Please grab your mobile phone. Can everyone hold your mobile phone on your hand? Can you already put on a camera? I'm going to put a song. We're going to move around. So here is where you are allowed to go to Mabala, you're allowed to go to the permanent principal secretary here and take a selfie with them. And then you post with that hashtag. And say anything you want to say. I'm enjoying the International Quality Education Conference with Mr. Mabala. I'm enjoying, say anything that you want to say and hashtag IQEC 2023. Are we all clear? Let's do this for 3 minutes. Look at that person you want to take a selfie with. And if they refuse, bring them to me. Okay? DJ, hit the song. Let's go. Let's get up. Let's stand up. With your camera, please stand up. Naomba tuinuke wote na kamera zetu. Aya, go take them selfies. Selfie time.
Ni leo, acha tu niwaweke wazi, mubaki na mishangao kuswa ya mapenzi nataka kuyaeleza, na leo tena waiteni paparazi warushe kwa
Take a selfie, take a selfie.
siataki mapenzi,
Wanafunzi
nataka
wangu nyinyi hamtaki
ensure that we stop the conflict. So as we talk about rethinking the education system, let us first of all stop the thing that will cause them to drop out of school. So these global experts came together and have now developed a key interventions that are now addressing violence against children. Next, please. And what do we do? As practitioners, we work to influence practice and the global agenda on prevention of violence against children through schools by amplifying the voices. We say we know it, we have experienced it, we are frontline workers, we bring the conversation at the fore. Next, please. That really runs through the objectives of what the coalition is about, share knowledge, insights, and perspectives of what is working to prevent violence against children. And this is something that is also needed in these spaces that we are talking about. Once we're talking about rethinking, what has worked to prevent violence against children, and bring it in the context of reimagining the world where digital revolution is taking over. How can we protect these children? Very recently, about 2 years ago, when COVID hit, all education systems were transitioned online. And what happened? A lot of children could not access education. But also in those spaces, we also realized that the children were actually getting abused. A lot of them were getting violated there. The second objective of the coalition is to contribute to building conducive environment for development and establishment of a community of practice that will be addressing violence against children in schools. And that includes each one of you that is in the room, and not leaving behind the children and the students themselves. And then the final one was to consolidate capacity of leaders and practitioners in the Global South to participate in the development and implementation of global priorities on preventing violence against children. Like I said, a lot of conversation is going on, but the voices from the Global South were not there. And so this is what we set ourselves to do, and I'll be sharing a lot of things that we have done lately. Next. Now, what makes us different? What makes us different is that we are singularly focusing on preventing violence in and through schools in the Global South. We are not going to talk about anything else. There's a lot of violence actions happening in online, in other spaces, corporal punishment. We are saying that our interest is in preventing violence against children in schools. Another thing that makes us different, which I've already talked about, is that we are exclusively formed by the Global South for the Global South, and we have extensive research that shows that many additional social factors that increase prevalence of violence against children in the Global South. The Global South seems to be a haven for violence that happens. Then the third thing that makes us different is that we have the expertise. We are unique. It's the coalition that is closest to the issue. We are the ones who are bringing tangible impact from the Global South to the Global South. And with combining experience backed with research, we are the experts set to change the agenda. Thank you. Next. Now, how are we doing this? How are we shifting the approach or shifting the social norms? We have chosen 3 approaches, which will also work as we think about revolutionizing the education system. One of them is advocate, the second one is convene, the third one is synthesize. We only advocate when we're informed by evidence. And so there's a lot of evidence that works. What works to prevent violence against children exists. And as a coalition, we've carried out an evidence review of over 150 publications across the Global South. And we know that there's evidence of what works. And creating a collective analysis of what works, building consensus, and using this to inform our advocacy. But even as we do the advocacy, the best place to do that is through these convenings. And that's why we requested for this space. And we are part of this conversation because we believe that this is also part of the process that will lead us to changing the situation of children, of violence against children in and through schools. Where do we desire this to go to? We expect that practitioners, those of you around the room, will share your research and experience and implement the learnings. We also believe that policymakers from the Global South will pick on the evidence and also believe that the donors will then increase their investment. What has been lacking in this whole conversation about preventing violence against children in and through schools is the lack of evidence consolidated evidence, but also the lack of investment in this sector. Next, please. I've already talked about the structure, but I just wanted to run you by how we are spread out. We are spread across 18 countries, 12 founding members with 3 regional hubs. And I'm happy to note that the Africa Regional Hub is hosted by Haki Elimu, based here in Tanzania, and co-hosted by Raising Voices. We have a hub in Asia with 14 members. We have a hub in Latin America with 15 members. And then we have 12 co-founding members. Next slide, please. About the Africa Hub, I've already mentioned it's coordinated by Haki Elimu and Raising Voices, and it is purposely intended to organize regional practitioners to steer regional conversations on violence against children in schools, build a movement which we are hoping to build today, that we believe that we need to snowball this activity beyond just the 12 founding members and the 17 that are in Latin America and the 8 that are in Africa, so that we begin to have more voices speak about preventing violence against children in and through schools, because it undermines all the conversations that we are having if we do not address it. Then we need to strengthen the structure and the capacity of the hub to promote South-to-South collaboration with other actors. Next, please. There are a couple of milestones that we have achieved. I've already mentioned that we carried out an evidence review on violence prevention in and through schools, and to look at the wealth of evidence, because the question was that there was a lot that was going on, but nobody knew who was doing what where and what resource was where. So we did that evidence review, and from the evidence review, we realized that there's a lot of practices or promising practices that are out there that can be applied to prevent violence against children. We did not only stop there. In 2022, we convened 3 seminar series, which were focused on looking at these successful interventions, and we shared them widely. Just recently, and a couple of weeks ago, we were at the FAWE conference 2023, and we were engaging with ministers. We held a roundtable of ministers, and the intention of holding the conversation with over 10 ministers was to just basically bring to the fore the importance of preventing violence against children in schools and the leadership role that the ministers can play in terms of leading this agenda to prevent violence in and through schools. Next, please. Now, when we talk about shifting, what we're talking about now is basically about a paradigm shift, that we need to shift the paradigms. Earlier on, a lot of conversation was going around, the discussion was going around the fact that we are from BBC, born before computers, and I would like to add T. Me, I'm from BBC T, born before computers and technology. Now, when you're born before computers and technology, even the simplest of things bullies you. Even just this microphone can make you forget what you're supposed to say. So we need to tilt the balance of power. We need to shift the balance of power in the global agendas, especially in regard to resourcing. I'm glad that I'm speaking after a development partner has spoken and has also illuminated the fact that how we can change the thinking, how we can change the mindset. So we need to change the balance of power and funding towards violence against children in schools, especially bringing on board practitioners and investing in practitioners from the Global South. A lot of investment, a lot of researchers. If you just Google now, violence against children in schools, you'll find a lot of scholarly reports written by people who are in the Global North. Very little from those in the Global South. The second one is that the second reason that we need to shift the paradigm is that there's increased evidence from Global South. I've already talked about that. More donors are now beginning to become aware about violence in and around schools, and we need to ensure that they begin to direct these resources to that. Then policymakers in the Global South should actually begin investing or prioritizing issues of violence against children in schools. I mentioned in the beginning that when we started this conversation, even the governments, a lot of violence was happening in and around schools, but no government or minister was speaking about it. When we had the conversation last week in Nairobi, many of them were actually in shock about the numbers that we shared with them. The statistics were overwhelming, and so this is the more reason that we should invest in this. Next, please. what, I think that's the same one next. All right, what are we trying to do now? As a coalition, we have a strategy that is 3 years, starting 2024, but we still intend to continue providing a platform for learning sharing of innovations on violence against children in schools between practitioners, with policymakers and everybody else. The second one is we intend to generate knowledge that will inform collective advocacy on VAX. We recently are going to do a continental policy mapping to look at the gaps in education. What are the policy gaps, especially when it comes to prevention of violence against children in education? Do we have policies? And what we want to do is to move away from just having the policies, but also ensuring that these policies are actually translated from being on paper to implementation. If you look at the statistic lately, more than 33 countries have banned corporal punishment in and through schools. But when you look at what is on paper and what is being implemented, very little implementation is taking place. So we want to use the evidence to generate advocacy and move that agenda forward. Next, please. That's my last slide. The Coalition for Good Schools is on the website. You can find us on those sites. And please, this is a clarion call for you to join. And why should you join? Because there are 3 things that we need to do together. If we are to rethink and change and be ready for the 4th industrial revolution, we need to address the things that undermine the gains that we'll be seeing, especially the gains in technology. The second one is that we need to move beyond policy and legislative bans and ensure that these are backed with changes in social norms, changes in attitudes. And then finally, we need to use an integrated approach where we involve multiple stakeholders, multiple spaces in an agenda to end violence against children in and through schools. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Stella, allow me to propose for Stella. Makofi jamani, hatoshi. I've seen most of you were very attentive listening for the presentation. And I hope after this day of today, you'll be getting so many coming to you to ask on how to join the coalition. So now, it's the time for questions, clarifications, and anything that you think probably you could get from Stella. Okay, there's one burning hand from this side. More hand? Okay, let me start with Hassan.
Let's keep them short here.
Thank you very much. My name is Hassan Mulusi. I'm working with Raising Voices. Thank you, Stella, for the presentation and the coalition for making inroads. 2 short questions. Who is eligible to join the coalition? And the second one, what counts as evidence that we are producing? Is it the RCT or practical and practice-based evidence also counts? Thank you.
Thank you so much. Hassan?
Thank you very much. Where was the other hand? I think that's the only question we have. Is there any other hand? Maybe you can...
Yes, there's another hand.
Okay. All right.
Thank you so much, Stella. I had written my question on the chat. I wanted to find out, are early marriages termed as evidence of sexual violence against the girl child as a result of the exchange between the perpetrator and parents? If not, why?
Asante, if you can respond to that and then you can wrap up. I'm trying to open the app. It's not opening on my side, so I'm sorry for those who have sent their questions onto or through the application.
There was only one.
There was only one. Thank you so much.
Yes.
That's great. Over to you, moderator.
Okay, you can respond, Stella.
Thank you. Who is eligible? Any practitioner, researcher, organization that is at the forefront of working within the education sector or in around schools. But we want to say that we are the coalition of the willing and the coalition of contributors. So you bring to the table what you have in terms of your experience or expertise, and you join the coalition. So all we have to do is to ensure that you work within the sector and are contributing to the agenda. Your second question, you actually answered the question when you asked it. You said, is it evidence, is it RCTs that count or practice-based? I think both count, because we are moving away from limiting ourselves to RCTs, because we want to see that we get more and more proven approaches to come to bear to the table. Thank you. Then the issue of early marriages, I didn't get the question quite clearly. If you could rephrase it again, moderator.
Now the question was, are early marriages termed as evidence of sexual violence against a girl child as a result of the exchange between the perpetrator and the parents? If not, why not?
Definitely it counts as sexual violence because it is power over. We are looking at the abuse of power. For as long as the person, the perpetrator, is an adult older than the child, then that is abuse of power, and therefore it counts as violence against the child. Yeah, it does count.
Okay, thank you, Stella. Any question? Last question? And if no, let me just give you the ending notes, which actually summarize what Stella was presenting. She highlighted very strongly by saying, whatever you're discussing about education systems, any development about education systems, then you must also don't forget to talk about other issues that are affecting children learning, issues such as violence. That was the ending note that I summarized from Stella. And having said that, we mark the end of our session. So make a huge clap for Stella. Bado haitoshi, makofi makubwa kwa Stella. And for those who are Tanzanians, as pointed by Stella, Haki Elimu is the hub for the region. So you can reach directly to Haki Elimu to learn more about the Coalition for Good Schools. And for those who will not be able to reach physically or anyway, you can visit the website as pointed by Stella. Thank you so much. And now I hand it to our MC and facilitator.
And let's put our hands again to the moderator. Thank you so much, our moderator. Please, if you may stand up, make 2 steps, and then take a picture together. So we keep very good memories of your engagement. Ladies and gentlemen, if one person can tell me which is the most pronounced name in the room today, which name came so vividly today? Many people or many speakers mentioned that name. Which name is that? Huh? We don't know. It's a sign either we were not paying attention or it became too cold for us to notice. But we have amongst us a gentleman by the name of Richard Olong. Where is Mr. Richard Olong? Can we please can you please stand up? Richard Olong. Okay, so with us today, Richard celebrates his birthday, and it is courteous for us to sing for him, right? Yeah, so for those who do not know, Richard Olong is an accomplished social development practitioner and a versatile data-driven education policy and development expert with over 20 years experience in civil society. He has a rich experience in managing complex multi-country education programs for civil society in diverse contexts. Richard is decisive, persistent, and responsive to changing contextual and organizational business needs. He is experienced in use of adaptive management techniques in managing complex socio-ecological systems. He is currently working for Oxfam Denmark as the regional program manager for the Horn, East and Southern Africa.
So let's give him a big round of applause as we sing for him. Happy birthday to you. Everybody, happy birthday to you. Richard, please come to the front. Happy birthday, dear Richard. Happy birthday to you. God bless him. God bless you today. God bless you today. How old are you? God bless you, dear Richard. God bless you today. This is his 31st birthday. A round of applause. Okay, so he has not cut the cake, but we're going to have a quick recap of the day, and then Tenmet will make a quick statement, and then we go outside for tea where the cake is served. Okay? So happy birthday, my brother, on behalf of everyone present, and thank you for being with us on your very special day. Please take back your seat. Well wishers will come again for selfies. Yeah? So, I'm reminded to reconfirm, the only two students from the university, right? None of you are CAs from the university because we want to facilitate. So don't come because you did not finish university and say you did not finish university, so you're still at the university. If you're invited as a university student, then please see the secretariat, they need to facilitate you. Technical desk, are you ready for the recap of the day? Dr. Was something? Hiyo meza hapo ya secretariat. Rapporteurs, they are not ready for the day. We'll give them time tomorrow morning to give us the update for the day as we catch up. So allow me, ladies and gentlemen, to have the very final speaker for the day, who is coming to basically thank us all for our active participation. This is none other but the Tenmet coordinator. A round of applause as he comes to speak to us. Karibu san.
Hello, good evening once again. Good evening. Asanteni sana. Well, we have come to the end of day one session, and I just want to take this opportunity to thank you all who have been able to come, but also for discussants, panelists, and moderators who have done quite a good job for day one. Our sessions tomorrow begins at 8:30. And I hope you will make it on time so that we are able to begin timely, but also to finish up timely for us all to be able to go to visit some of the places in Dar es Salaam. For those who are coming from different countries, Dar es Salaam is a peaceful place. So try to enjoy as much as you can. But in other words, do not over-enjoy so that tomorrow we miss you. But the other thing, we will be having quite critical sessions tomorrow, and I urge each one of us to be able to attend. And we will be discussing stuff including inclusive digital teaching. Something you should not be able to miss. But again, we will have a session on educational financing, and we all know education, talking around the fourth industrial revolutions requires investment in finance. And as we'll be closing, may I have requested the Secretariat to stay behind so that we reassess and reflect on the day. Otherwise, I just want to wish you a very warm good evening, wherever you shall be. And the Secretariat is going to stay back here for almost an hour. In case there is anything you wish to sort out with the Secretariat, please let us know, and we'll be here to support you. For those who might need directions on how to leave and how to come back, we could as well be able to support your stay in Dar es Salaam. Those who are being supported or implementing the EOL, Education Out Loud program team, kindly stay behind. We have something to discuss before we are all dismissed. Otherwise, enjoy the rest of the day, and may God bless you. Asante. Karibu Austin.
So don't forget to grab your cup of tea as you walk out, the cake courtesy of our birthday boy, and let's meet tomorrow. We start at 8:30, so if you can come here earlier, we'll be ready and happy to receive you. Thank you so much. DJ. So we have a QR code on the monitors. We have the QR code on the monitors. Those of us who would like to see the pictures before they go on to the application, you can already see the pictures through the QR code that are being displayed. Thank you. Mnaweza mkaona picha kwenye QR code ambayo inatokea hapo, lakini zitawekwa pia kwenye application yetu.